Welcome to my channel, Stars and Stripes Stories. Today's story is one that will leave you speechless, because it's about courage, sacrifice, and a truth that only scars can reveal. So sit back, listen closely, and let the story unfold. The conference room on the Navy base was filled with chatter. Officers in crisp uniforms shuffled folders, whispered updates, and glanced at the giant map glowing on the wall. At the head of the table sat Admiral Carter, a man known for his discipline and his unwillingness to be impressed by anyone. He had seen war, blood, and loss. He had commanded fleets in some of the hardest conflicts in recent memory. He was a man who thought nothing could shake him anymore. But that day, someone unexpected walked into the room. She was young, in her late 20s, with sharp eyes that spoke of quiet strength. Her uniform carried no high rank, no medals that jingled as she walked. To most in the room, she looked like another junior officer assigned to logistics. A file was placed in front of her, and one commander muttered under his breath, "Why is she even here? We need fighters, not clerks." The Admiral raised a hand, silencing the whispers. "Let her speak." She began to brief the room. Her voice was steady, her knowledge exact. She detailed enemy movements, predicted ambush zones, and outlined rescue corridors for trapped sailors. Her words carried precision and depth, like someone who had lived the battlefield, not just studied it. Halfway through, a skeptical captain interrupted. "And how would you know that? You've never set foot in a live combat zone." His tone carried doubt, almost mocking. The room grew tense. The woman paused, her eyes flicking to the Admiral. Then, slowly, with a calmness that hushed the entire room, she reached for the buttons of her shirt. Gasps echoed as she pulled the fabric aside, lifting it just enough to reveal her torso. Across her ribs, deep scars ran like jagged rivers carved into flesh. Old wounds, healed but unmistakable, marks of war. Some were bullet trails, others, shrapnel tears. They were not the kind of scars someone got by accident. They told a story of survival. For the first time in years, Admiral Carter's stern mask cracked. His eyes softened, his jaw tightened, and his voice went silent. Because he recognized those scars. Years ago, in a desert operation long buried in classified files, a covert convoy had been ambushed. Reports said everyone was lost except a handful who fought their way out. Rumors spoke of a young medic who carried wounded Marines on her back, taking rounds to her own ribs but refusing to fall. No official record bore her name, no medal was pinned on her chest, but the whispers among veterans called her the Angel of Kandahar. The Admiral had heard those whispers. And now, here she stood in front of him. The silence was heavy. The young officer lowered her shirt, buttoned it back, and spoke quietly. "Sir, I know because I've been there. I know because I watched brothers fall, and I swore I would never let their sacrifices be in vain. Strategy on paper is important, but survival on the ground is something else entirely." The room shifted. The same captain who mocked her moments earlier lowered his gaze, shame written on his face. The officers leaned forward, suddenly listening, not just to her words, but to the weight behind them. The Admiral finally spoke, his voice low but filled with respect. "Continue, Lieutenant. The floor is yours." And she did. Her plan wasn't just theory, it was lived experience. She outlined how to rotate supply lines under fire, how to build fallback zones in terrain that seemed hopeless, and how to protect the wounded when the enemy swarmed like wolves. She didn't just speak like an officer, she spoke like someone who had been the last line of defense when everyone else was down. When she finished, the Admiral stood. For the first time in decades, in front of his men, he walked around the table and extended his hand. "You've earned this room's respect. And mine." The officers stared in silence as the Admiral did something no one had expected. He bowed his head ever so slightly, a gesture of honor. But the woman shook her head. "I don't need respect, sir. I just need you to listen. Because if we don't act, more men will carry scars they never should have had to bear." The Admiral's eyes glistened for just a moment. Not many knew this, but his own son had been lost in combat years ago. Hearing her words, seeing her scars, it cut deeper than any report ever could. From that day forward, her voice was never questioned again. She became the backbone of operations, guiding missions not just with intelligence, but with the weight of sacrifice etched into her skin. In time, many of the men she helped save would meet her. Some cried when they realized she was the reason they were alive. Others simply saluted, unable to put their gratitude into words. She never asked for thanks. She never asked for recognition. She simply carried on, day after day, as if her life was meant to turn pain into purpose. But in the Admiral's heart, the moment never faded. He knew true heroes often went unrecognized. And he knew that scars, though silent, speak louder than medals. One evening, long after the war room had emptied, the Admiral sat alone at his desk. He pulled out an old photograph of his son in uniform. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "If only you had someone like her with you that day." His voice cracked, but then steadied. "Maybe you'd still be here." He leaned back in his chair, the image of those rib scars carved into his mind. They were not marks of weakness. They were proof of survival, proof of sacrifice, proof that some battles are fought long after the gunfire stops. And somewhere on base, the young woman sat alone too, stitching a torn sleeve on her uniform. She never thought of herself as a hero. She simply thought of herself as someone who had promised to never walk away while others still had a chance to live. Her scars remained hidden most of the time, but she carried them not as shame, not as burden, but as a reminder. A reminder that the strongest armor isn't steel or Kevlar, it's the will to keep standing, even when life has tried its hardest to put you down. So the next time you see someone quiet in the corner, someone who doesn't brag about medals or ranks, remember this story. Because the greatest warriors aren't always the loudest. Sometimes, they're the ones who speak only when necessary, and when they do, the whole room falls silent. That day, she raised her shirt to reveal her wound, and the Admiral fell silent because he finally understood. Scars are not signs of weakness. They are stories of strength. Thank you for watching today's story on Stars and Stripes Stories. If this touched your heart, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and never forget, the real heroes among us often walk quietly, carrying scars that speak louder than words.